3 days, 20 engineers, and a $100 million government contract unraveling like thread from a frayed seam. On the 42nd floor of Innovate Dynamics, error logs spilled down a massive LED screen like a waterfall of failure. The air in conference room 42A was thick with tension, stale coffee, and desperation. Evelyn Reed, the company's icy, relentless CEO, had staked everything on Project Chimera and was watching it collapse before her eyes. But salvation would not come from an MIT genius or a six-figure consultant. It would come from an 11-year-old girl with a backpack full of crayons, who wasn't even supposed to be there. And what she was about to do with a single marker would change the future of an empire. Just before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. We love seeing how far these stories reach. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. Now let's jump back in. Enjoy the story. A child's drawing on a whiteboard was about to save a $100 million company or destroy it. Inside the sterile glass tower of Innovate Dynamics, a $100 million government contract was slipping through the fingers of the brightest minds in the country. The only person who saw the answer wasn't an engineer. She was an 11-year-old girl who wasn't even supposed to be there. The silence in conference room 42A was a living thing. It was heavy, suffocating, and tasted of stale coffee and failure. For 3 days, it had been the only constant. Outside, the city of San Francisco hummed with life, its famous fog rolling over the hills like a soft gray blanket. But inside, a storm of a different kind was raging. Evelyn Reed, the CEO of Innovate Dynamics, stood at the head of the immense oak table. At 45, she commanded a presence that was both feared and respected. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe knot, emphasizing the sharp, intelligent lines of her face. Her suit was a crisp, no-nonsense black, a piece of armor she wore for battles like this one. Her gaze, cold and analytical, swept across the faces of her top engineers. They were the best in the field, recruited from the most prestigious universities, yet they looked like schoolchildren waiting for a scolding. "Report," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. A young man named Mark Benson, the lead systems architect, cleared his throat. He was brilliant, with a degree from MIT and an ego to match. "Ms. Reed, we're still running diagnostics. The latency in the neural network, it's unpredictable. We stabilize one data set, and another one fractures. It's a cascade failure." On the massive LED screen that covered the far wall, a complex 3D model of a human heart was supposed to be rotating smoothly. This was Project Chimera, an advanced AI designed to predict hereditary heart conditions with 99% accuracy. It was the project that was supposed to secure the company's future with a 9-figure government contract. Instead, the model stuttered. It would stop, flicker, and then jump, like a film reel catching in a projector. Crimson error logs scrolled endlessly down the side of the screen, a digital waterfall of failure. "Unpredictable is not a word I accept, Mark," Evelyn stated, her voice dangerously calm. "We are 3 days from the final demonstration. 3 days from either securing our position as industry leaders or becoming a cautionary tale." She walked slowly along the table, her heels making sharp, distinct clicks on the polished concrete floor. Each click seemed to punctuate the mounting pressure. "We have thrown every resource at this. Our best people. A budget that could fund a small country. And what we have is a system that is breaking itself apart from the inside out." She stopped behind a junior engineer who flinched, avoiding her eyes. "What is the root cause?" No one answered. The silence returned, deeper this time. Foreheads glistened with sweat under the cool LED lights. Evelyn sighed, a quiet, frustrated sound. "I don't want excuses. I don't want theories. I want a solution." She turned and walked toward the door. "You have until morning. Fix it." The door closed behind her with a soft, final click, leaving the scent of her expensive perfume and the crushing weight of her expectations in the room. The engineers slumped in their chairs, the brief release of tension immediately replaced by a fresh wave of dread. They were lost, and they knew it. Miles away, in a small, tidy apartment that smelled of cinnamon and floor polish, Michael Hayes was carefully braiding his daughter's hair. Lily, at 11, had hair the color of spun gold and eyes the color of a summer sky. She sat patiently on a stool in their small kitchen, reading a book about constellations while her father's gentle hands worked. Michael, 38, was a man shaped by hardship, but not broken by it. His life was a quiet routine of work, home, and Lily. He was the night janitor at Innovate Dynamics. It wasn't the life he had dreamed of. Years ago, he had been a promising engineering student himself, with a mind for solving complex problems. But life had other plans. The sudden illness of his wife, the mountain of medical bills, and then her loss had forced him to drop out of college and take any job that would let him be there for his daughter. "All done, superstar," he said, fastening the end of the braid with a small blue band. Lily closed her book and turned, giving him a bright smile. "Thanks, Dad. It looks like a DNA helix." Michael chuckled. "Only you would say that." He looked at the clock on the wall. 6:30 p.m. His shift started in an hour. Usually, his neighbor, Mrs. Gable, would watch Lily. But a call an hour earlier had changed everything. Her son had been in a minor car accident, and she had rushed to the hospital. "Listen, Lily Bug," he said, kneeling down to be at her eye level. "Mrs. Gable won't be able to watch you tonight, and I couldn't find anyone else on such short notice." Lily's brow furrowed with concern. "What are we going to do?" Michael took a deep breath. He hated this part. "You're going to have to come to work with me. We'll have to be very, very quiet. You can bring your tablet and your books. There's a small break room on the 30th floor that no one uses at night. You can set up camp there. We just have to be invisible, okay? It's against the rules." Lily nodded solemnly. "I can be invisible. Like a ninja." Michael managed a weak smile. He felt a familiar pang of guilt. He wanted to give her the world, but most days he could barely give her a babysitter. He packed her backpack with her favorite snacks, her tablet, and the book on constellations. He added her sketchbook and a case of colored pencils. Drawing always kept her calm. As they rode the bus downtown, Michael rehearsed the plan. They would use the service elevator. He would get her settled in the break room before he started his rounds. He felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach. If he was caught, he would be fired. No questions asked. But the thought of leaving Lily home alone was far worse. The lobby of Innovate Dynamics was a cathedral of glass and steel. Even at night, it was imposing. Michael swiped his key card at a side entrance, the lock beeping softly. The air inside was cool and still. "Okay, ninja," he whispered. "Time for stealth mode." Lily gave him a determined nod, her small hand clutching his. They took the service elevator, a stark metal box that smelled of grease and disinfectant. On the 30th floor, the break room was just as he remembered, small, windowless, with a worn-out sofa and a table. "Here we are," he said, setting her backpack on the table. "You've got your games, your books. The Wi-Fi password is on the fridge. I'll check on you every hour, I promise. Don't leave this room for any reason, okay?" "I won't, Dad. I promise." He looked at her, so small in the big, empty building, and his heart ached. He kissed the top of her head. "Be good, superstar." He closed the door quietly and began his shift. The 42nd floor was the executive level, his last stop of the night. It was always the quietest, a ghost town of empty desks and dark offices. As he pushed his cart of cleaning supplies down the plushly carpeted hallway, he could hear the low, tense murmurs coming from conference room 42A. The lights were still on. He sighed. It meant a long night for the engineers, and a messy room for him to clean later. He started at the far end of the hall, emptying trash cans and wiping down surfaces, his movements practiced and efficient. An hour passed, then another. The murmuring from the conference room grew more agitated, punctuated by moments of frustrated silence. Around 11 p.m., the door to 42A finally opened. The engineers filed out, their faces pale with exhaustion and defeat. They looked like a beaten army. Mark Benson was the last to leave, running a hand through his already messy hair. He didn't even glance at Michael. To them, he was just part of the furniture. Michael waited a few minutes before pushing his cart toward the room. He needed to clear the trash, wipe down the table, and reset the room for the morning. As he entered, the first thing he noticed was the giant screen. The image of the heart was frozen, a single, glaring line of red error code displayed beneath it. The whiteboard next to it was a chaotic mess of equations and diagrams, lines crossed out, and question marks scribbled in the margins. He saw the discarded coffee cups, crumpled papers, and energy bar wrappers. He began to methodically clean the room, his mind quietly observing the problem on the screen. He could still understand the basics of the code, the fundamental logic. He saw the tangled loops and the recursive formulas. It was a beautiful problem in its own way. A complex knot waiting for someone to find the right thread to pull. He felt a ghost of his old self, the student who loved challenges like this, stir within him. But he quickly pushed the feeling away. He was a janitor now. This was not his world. Meanwhile, on the 30th floor, Lily was getting restless. She had finished her book, played all her games, and drawn 3 pictures of distant galaxies. She was thirsty. Her dad had told her not to leave, but the water fountain was just down the hall. She'd be quick. No one would ever know. She quietly opened the door and peeked out. The hallway was empty and silent. The fountain was at the far end, near the main elevators. She tiptoed down the hall, her sneakers silent on the polished floor. After getting a drink, her curiosity got the better of her. She knew her dad's last stop was the top floor. She wondered what it looked like. She pressed the elevator button. The ride up was silent and smooth. When the doors opened on the 42nd floor, she stepped out into a world of deep carpets and dark wood. It was quiet, except for the soft hum of electronics. She saw a light on at the end of the hallway and a cleaning cart parked outside. Dad. She walked toward the light, wanting to surprise him. She peered into the conference room. Her dad was there, his back to her, wiping down the long table. But it wasn't her dad that caught her eye. It was the screen. The huge screen showed a big, colorful picture of a heart that was broken. Not cracked in half, but glitchy and messy. Lines of red text blinked angrily next to it. On the whiteboard beside it, there was a confusing drawing of boxes and lines and circles. It looked like a puzzle. Lily loved puzzles. Her dad had given her a logic game on her tablet for her birthday. It was a game about directing streams of water through a series of pipes and gates. You had to make sure the water went to the right place in the right order. If you sent it down the wrong pipe, the whole system would back up and fail. The drawing on the whiteboard looked just like one of the hardest levels in her game. She could see the starting point, a big box on the left, and the end point, a big box on the right. But in the middle, the lines were all tangled up. One thick line went from a box labeled data input and split into 3 smaller lines. But another line, coming from a box labeled predictive analysis, was trying to cross over and go back to the start. In her game, you could never do that. You couldn't send the water backward in the middle of the pipes. It would cause a jam every time. This line, she thought, was in the wrong place. It was making a mess. It needed to wait its turn. It should connect after the first set of gates, not before. She didn't think. She just acted. She saw a set of colored dry erase markers on the ledge of the whiteboard. She picked up a blue one. Her dad was still busy, humming softly as he worked. Quietly, she stepped up to the board. She drew a neat, confident arrow, showing the path the jammed line was supposed to take. She drew it connecting to a different box further down the chain. Then, with a red marker, she drew a big, loopy X over the wrong line. It was so simple, just like her game. The water was going the wrong way. She had fixed the pipes. She stepped back and looked at her work. It looked much better now, more organized. The path was clear. Suddenly, she heard a sharp gasp behind her. Michael had turned from the table and frozen in horror. He saw his daughter, his sweet, quiet Lily, standing in the executive conference room, holding a marker, having drawn all over the company's work. His heart leaped into his throat. "Lily, what did you do?" he whispered, his voice tight with panic. Lily turned, her face falling when she saw the fear in his eyes. "I was just fixing it, Daddy. It was a puzzle. The line was in the wrong place." "Oh, honey, no. This isn't a puzzle. This is work. Very important work." He rushed to her side, grabbing an eraser. "We have to get this off before anyone sees." He started to scrub at the board, but the marker was new and the ink was strong. Her confident blue arrow and the big red X remained, faint but visible, like ghosts on the white surface. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. They were caught. He was going to lose his job. "Come on," he said, his voice trembling slightly. He grabbed her hand, left the cart, and rushed her to the service elevator. He didn't stop until they were outside, the cool night air hitting them like a slap. His mind was racing. Maybe no one would notice. Maybe they would think one of the engineers did it. But he knew better. This was not the kind of place where things went unnoticed. High above them, in her penthouse office on the top floor, Evelyn Reed stared out at the city lights, but she didn't see them. Her mind was replaying the day's failures. Project Chimera was her legacy. It was personal. She had lost her own father to a heart condition that had gone undetected for years. This AI was supposed to prevent that from happening to other families. Defeated, she decided to take one last look. Maybe a fresh perspective would help. She rode the elevator down to the 42nd floor and walked back into the silent conference room. She looked at the chaotic whiteboard, a perfect portrait of her team's failure. And then she saw it. Amongst the frantic scrawls of her high-paid engineers, there were two new marks. A childishly drawn, but perfectly clear, blue arrow, and a big, simple red X. They were not part of the original mess. They were a suggestion, a correction. Her first reaction was a flash of anger. Who would dare? Who would have the audacity to graffiti the board in the middle of a crisis? But then, she looked closer. She followed the path of the new blue arrow. Her mind, trained to see patterns in chaos, began to work. The arrow bypassed a recursive loop. It rerouted a primary data query to perform its check after the initial sorting algorithm, not before. The red X crossed out the very line of logic that was causing the feedback loop, the one that was creating the cascade failure. It was impossibly simple. So simple, her team of geniuses had overlooked it entirely. They had been trying to build a dam to stop the flood, when all they needed to do was divert a small stream. Her breath caught. Could it be? She walked over to the main terminal, her heart starting to beat faster. With deft fingers, she brought up the core code. She created a new simulation branch. She translated the simple, hand-drawn correction into code. She rerouted the query. She bypassed the loop. Then, she clicked run. For a tense 5 seconds, the system processed the change. And then it happened. The error logs vanished. The latency warning light on the diagnostic panel turned from a flashing red to a solid, beautiful green. On the main screen, the 3D model of the human heart began to rotate. It was flawless, smooth, perfect. Evelyn Reed stared at the screen, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. 3 days. A team of 20 elite engineers. $500,000 in overtime. All of it solved by a ghost who drew on her whiteboard with a blue marker. A cold, determined look settled on her face. She wasn't just going to fix the project. She was going to find the person who had just saved it. She walked out of the room and headed directly for the security office. Pull the camera footage for conference room 42A for the last hour. She commanded the night guard. I want to see everyone who went in or out of that room. The guard, startled by her presence, quickly complied. The footage appeared on the monitor. He fast-forwarded through the engineers leaving. Then he stopped. The janitor, Michael Hayes, entered with his cart. They watched him clean. And then, a small figure appeared in the doorway. A little girl with blonde hair. Evelyn leaned closer to the screen, her eyes narrowed. She watched as the child walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and made the correction. She watched as the janitor discovered her, panicked, and rushed her out of the room. The security guard looked at Evelyn, confused. It's just Hayes's kid. He knows he's not supposed to bring her here. I can write him up, Ms. Reed. Evelyn held up a hand, silencing him. She wasn't looking at the security guard. She was looking at the screen, at the image of the little girl pointing out the flaw that had stumped an entire department. Get me Michael Hayes's employee file, she said, her voice quiet and intense. And find out where he lives. I'm paying him a visit. Tonight. The drive to Michael's apartment building was one Evelyn Reed would never forget. She was used to the manicured lawns of Pacific Heights, not the cramped, narrow streets of the city's outer districts. Her sleek, black sedan looked alien parked next to dented pickup trucks and aging family minivans. The building itself was old but clean, a brick structure that showed its age in the faint cracks running along its facade. She found apartment 3B and stood before the faded blue door for a long moment. What was she doing here? What was she possibly going to say? She was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar tech firm, about to interrogate a child about a complex neural network problem. The situation was absurd. Yet, the smooth, perfectly rotating heart on her conference room screen was not. That was real. She knocked. The sound was louder than she expected in the quiet hallway. Inside, Michael had just gotten Lily to sleep. His own mind was a storm of worry. He had spent the last hour imagining the phone call he would receive in the morning, the cold, impersonal voice from HR telling him his services were no longer required. When the knock came, He assumed it was a neighbor, perhaps complaining about a noise he hadn't realized they were making. He opened the door, and his blood ran cold. Standing in his hallway was Evelyn Reed. Not in a boardroom, not behind her imposing desk, but here, on his doorstep. She was dressed in the same sharp, black suit, looking completely out of place, and yet utterly in command. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Michael's mind went blank with shock and fear. "Mr. Hayes," she began, her voice even and direct. "May I come in?" It wasn't really a question. Michael, speechless, could only nod and step aside. He felt as though a queen had just walked into his humble home. He gestured numbly toward his small, worn-out sofa. Evelyn's eyes quickly scanned the apartment. It was small, but immaculately clean. A child's drawings were taped to the refrigerator. A stack of library books sat on the coffee table. There was a warmth here, a sense of family and love that felt a world away from her own sterile, minimalist penthouse. She chose to stand. "I believe you know why I'm here," she said, getting straight to the point. Michael's throat was dry. "Ms. Reed, I am so sorry. I know the rules. It was an emergency, my babysitter. I was going to call in, but I can't afford to lose a day's pay. I take full responsibility. It will never happen again." Evelyn held up a hand. "I'm not here about the rules, Mr. Hayes. I'm here about the whiteboard." Michael flinched. "I tried to erase it. She didn't mean any harm. She's just a kid. She likes puzzles. Please, don't blame her. This is my fault. Fire me, but please, just leave her out of it." Evelyn studied him. She saw the genuine terror in his eyes, the fierce, protective instinct of a father. "I have no intention of firing you," she said, and a flicker of Michael's panic subsided, replaced by profound confusion. "I want you to tell me what she saw." "What she saw?" Michael stammered. "The drawing. The blue arrow. The red X." She made a correction to the logic flow of Project Chimera. A correction that, I might add, my entire team of highly paid experts failed to see for 3 days. "I want to know how." Michael stared at her, dumbfounded. He had assumed Lily had just made a mess, a random scribble. He hadn't truly looked at what she had drawn. She said the line was in the wrong place. She plays this game on her tablet, a logic puzzle with pipes. She said it looked like the pipes were jammed. Evelyn's expression remained unreadable, but inside, her mind was racing. Pipes. The child had visualized a complex data flow problem as plumbing. She had stripped away the layers of jargon and code and saw the raw, fundamental structure beneath. It was a form of genius she had never encountered before. "I need to speak with her," Evelyn stated. "She's asleep," Michael said quickly, his protective instincts flaring up again. "She's only 11, Ms. Reed. She doesn't understand any of this." "I think she understands it better than anyone," Evelyn countered softly. "This isn't a negotiation, Mr. Hayes. The future of my company may very well depend on a conversation with your daughter. Wake her up." Her tone was firm, leaving no room for argument. Reluctantly, Michael went to Lily's small bedroom. He gently shook her awake, his heart heavy. Lily blinked sleepily, confused to see him looking so worried. "Lilybug, there's someone here to see you," he said quietly. "The lady from my work. She wants to ask you about the drawing you made." Lily was suddenly wide awake. "Am I in trouble?" "No, honey, you're not in trouble." He wasn't so sure about himself. He led her into the living room. Lily stood in her unicorn pajamas, nervously clutching a stuffed rabbit, her golden hair a messy halo around her head. She looked tiny and vulnerable standing before the imposing figure of Evelyn Reed. Evelyn knelt down, a surprising gesture that brought her to Lily's eye level. Her face softened almost imperceptibly. "Hello, Lily," she said, her voice much gentler than before. "My name is Evelyn. I'm not here to get you in trouble. I'm here to thank you." Lily looked from Evelyn to her father, confused. "The drawing you made on my whiteboard tonight," Evelyn continued. "Can you tell me what you saw?" Lily's nervousness began to fade, replaced by the earnest desire to explain her logic. "It was the loop," she said, her voice small but clear. "The line from the prediction box. It was trying to go backward to check the data again, but the other lines were still moving forward. It created a traffic jam in the system." Evelyn listened, fascinated. Lily wasn't using technical terms, but her description was perfectly accurate. She was describing a recursive feedback loop that was causing a system-wide resource conflict. "So," Evelyn prompted, "what did you do?" "I moved the line," Lily said simply. "I made it wait." It can check the data after the first part is finished. Then there's no traffic jam. She looked up at Evelyn, her blue eyes wide and serious. It's more efficient that way. Efficient. An 11-year-old in unicorn pajamas had just used the word efficient to describe a solution to a $100 million problem. Evelyn Reed felt a slow smile spread across her face. It was a rare sight, one that most of her employees had never witnessed. Yes, Lily, she said. It is. She stood up and looked at Michael, who had been watching the entire exchange with a mixture of pride and utter disbelief. Mr. Hayes, she said, her tone all business once more. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. I'm calling a full project meeting. I want you both there. Michael's jaw dropped. Us? In a project meeting? Ms. Reed, I'm a janitor. She's a child. What could we possibly do? Your daughter just did what 20 engineers could not. She gave us the solution. Now I need her to explain it to them. And you will be there with her. She pulled a business card from her suit pocket. My personal number. A car will be sent to pick you up at 9. Don't be late. And with that, she turned and walked out, leaving the door open behind her. Michael and Lily stood in the stunned silence, the cool night air drifting into their small apartment. Michael looked from the business card in his hand to his daughter, who was now sleepily rubbing her eyes, unaware that she had just turned their entire world upside down. The next morning, the atmosphere in conference room 42A was thick with tension and confusion. Evelyn had called the emergency meeting with a cryptic message. A solution has been found. Attendance is mandatory. The engineers were gathered, whispering amongst themselves. Mark Benson was holding court, looking smug. She's bluffing, he said to a colleague. Trying to light a fire under us. There's no way anyone solved it overnight. We would have detected it. The door opened. They all straightened up, expecting to see Evelyn. Instead, Michael Hayes, their night janitor, walked in. He was wearing his best pair of slacks and a button-down shirt that looked slightly frayed at the collar. Holding his hand was his daughter, Lily, in a simple blue dress, her blonde hair neatly braided. She clutched her stuffed rabbit. A wave of bewildered silence washed over the room. The engineers exchanged confused, and in some cases, scornful, glances. What was the janitor doing here with his kid? Mark Benson actually let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Is this some kind of joke? Before Michael could respond, Evelyn Reed entered behind them. Her presence immediately silenced the room. Good morning, she said, her voice crisp. Please, take a seat. She gestured to 2 empty chairs right next to her at the head of the table. Michael hesitated, but a firm look from Evelyn urged him forward. He and Lily sat down, the engineers staring at them as if they were aliens who had just landed. Lily's small feet didn't even touch the floor. As I mentioned, Evelyn began. A solution to our latency problem has been found. The patch was implemented last night. The system is stable and running at 100% efficiency. A low murmur of disbelief went through the room. Mark's smug expression faltered. Who, he asked. Who fixed it? Was it the consulting team from Stanford? Evelyn's gaze was like ice. No, Mark. It wasn't. She looked down the table, her eyes landing on each and every one of them. The person who identified the flaw that has held this company hostage for the past 3 days is sitting in this room. Every head turned, looking for a new face, an unfamiliar expert who might have been flown in overnight. Evelyn allowed the silence to stretch for a moment before she placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. This is Lily Hayes, she announced. And she is the one who solved your problem. The silence that followed was no longer just confused. It was absolute, deafening shock. Jaws hung open. People stared, first at the little girl, then at Evelyn, as if trying to determine if she had lost her mind. Mark Benson was the first to recover. He looked at Evelyn, his face a mask of incredulity and professional outrage. With all due respect, Ms. Reed, you cannot be serious, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. You're telling us that this child fixed a multi-layered quantum state neural network? That is impossible. It must have been a fluke. A coincidental system reset. It was not a fluke, Evelyn said calmly. She tapped a button on the console in front of her. The main screen lit up, showing the whiteboard from the previous night. A photo of Lily's drawing, the simple blue arrow and the red X, was displayed for all to see. This, Evelyn said, her voice ringing with authority, is the solution. Elegant, simple, and correct. Something all of you, with your advanced degrees and years of experience, completely missed. You were all looking at the problem from the inside out. Lily saw it from the outside in. She saw the pattern, not the code. She turned to Lily. Lily, would you be willing to explain to these gentlemen what you told me last night? About the traffic jam? All eyes fell on the little girl. Lily shrank back in her seat, intimidated by the intense stares of so many adults. She looked at her father, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. He was terrified, but he would not let his daughter face this alone. Lily took a shaky breath and spoke, her voice just above a whisper, but clear in the silent room. The data, it was trying to do too many things at once, she began. It was like trying to pour juice into a bottle while someone else is still trying to pour water out of it. It just makes a mess. I just made it wait its turn. She looked at Mark Benson, her expression one of pure, innocent logic. You have to let one thing finish before you start the next. It's neater that way. Mark stared at her, his face flushing with a mixture of anger and humiliation. To be lectured on the principles of data processing by a child was the ultimate insult. This is a circus, he muttered, shaking his head. The only circus here, Mark, Evelyn cut in, her voice like steel, is the one that has been running for the past 3 days, costing this company millions of dollars and jeopardizing its future. Lily Hayes has done more for Innovate Dynamics in 5 minutes with a marker than your entire team has in 72 hours. She stood up, her authority absolute. For the next week, Lily will be acting as a special consultant on Project Chimera. A collective gasp went through the room. She and her father will be given full access. I expect every single one of you to treat her with the respect she has earned. You will listen to her. You will answer her questions. And perhaps, if you're smart, you will learn something from her. Am I understood? No one dared to speak. The message was clear. The janitor's daughter was, for the moment, the most important person in the room. Michael sat frozen in his chair, his mind reeling. An hour ago, he was worried about being fired. Now, his daughter was a consultant, and he was her handler. He looked at Lily, who was looking down at her stuffed rabbit, seemingly unaware of the revolution she had just started. A new chapter had just begun. And for the first time in a long time, Michael Hayes had no idea what was going to happen next. The first day of Lily's consultancy was one of the most surreal of Michael's life. The car, a silent, black-town car with tinted windows, arrived precisely at 9, just as Evelyn had promised. Lily, dressed in another simple but neat dress, looked out the window with wide-eyed wonder as they were driven not to the service entrance, but to the grand, gleaming front lobby of the Innovate Dynamics Tower. The morning receptionist, a woman who had never given Michael more than a passing glance, now stared with open curiosity as he and his daughter were personally greeted by Evelyn's executive assistant. They were escorted to the 42nd floor, the domain of executives and top-tier engineers, a place Michael had only ever seen after hours with a mop and bucket in his hands. Evelyn had prepared a small and used office for them. It had a large window with a breathtaking view of the bay. There was a desk for Michael and a smaller table for Lily, which had been set up with a brand-new tablet, a large sketchpad, and a rainbow of colored markers. It was a kind gesture, but the office still felt like a gilded cage. They were here, but they were not one of them. The morning meeting was a testament to that fact. Lily and Michael sat at the big conference table again. Mark Benson and his team were there, their faces set like stone. The hostility was no longer overt, but it was a palpable force in the room, a low, cold hum beneath the hum of the air conditioning. Mark began the meeting by outlining a new, minor issue that had cropped up during the night's stress tests. We're seeing a data bottleneck in the tertiary diagnostic subroutine, he announced, his words deliberately laced with the densest jargon he could muster. The heuristic algorithm is failing to properly prioritize the query packets, causing a 0.02% data loss when cross-referencing against the legacy archives. He looked directly at Lily as he said it, a faint, challenging smirk on his lips. It was a deliberate attempt to confuse and exclude her. The other engineers followed his lead, launching into a highly technical discussion, throwing around acronyms and complex terms like weapons. Lily sat quietly, not understanding the words, but watching the diagram on the main screen. It showed data packets, represented by little green dots, moving from one box to another. She saw how they would pile up at one of the boxes, getting stuck before they could move on, just as Mark had described. Michael felt a surge of anger. He knew what they were doing. They were trying to intimidate a child. He was about to speak up, to ask them to simplify their language, when Lily tugged on his sleeve. "Dad," she whispered, "can I have my sketchbook?" Michael passed it to her. She picked up a brown marker and a green one. While the engineers continued their debate, she began to draw. She didn't draw boxes and dots. She drew a picture of a grocery store checkout. She drew several long lines of people, the data packets, all trying to get to a single cashier, the subroutine. Then, on the next page, she drew a second picture. This time, she drew an express lane. A simple sign above it read, 10 items or less. In this picture, the people with only a few items went into the short, fast lane, and the people with full carts stayed in the main lines. There was no more traffic jam. Everyone was moving smoothly. When the engineer's argument had finally wound down to a frustrated silence, Lily quietly tore the second page from her sketchbook. She held it out to her father. Michael looked at it, and for the first time, he fully understood the unique, brilliant way his daughter's mind worked. He cleared his throat. All eyes turned to him, most of them filled with annoyance. "Excuse me," Michael said, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. "Lily has a suggestion." Mark Benson sighed dramatically. "All right, let's hear it. Does it involve magic wands or unicorn tears?" A few of the younger engineers snickered. Michael ignored him. He walked to the front of the room and held up Lily's drawing for everyone to see. "Lily thinks the problem is that you only have one cashier," he said, using her simple analogy. "All the data, big and small, is waiting in the same line. She wants to know, why isn't there an express lane?" The room went silent. The engineers stared at the childish drawing. The concept was so basic, so fundamentally simple, that they had never even considered it. They had been trying to speed up the cashier, not manage the lines. Mark's face went pale. An express lane. In system terms, it was a priority query channel. A simple script that would sort data packets by size before they reached the diagnostic routine, sending the smaller, quicker packets through a separate, parallel process. It would take less than an hour to implement, and it would work. He was so furious at the simplicity of it, and so humiliated that the child had seen it and he hadn't, that he couldn't even speak. Evelyn, who had been watching the entire scene unfold from the back of the room, stepped forward. "An excellent suggestion, Lily," she said, her voice carrying a clear note of approval. "Mark, implement it immediately. I want a report on my desk in an hour showing me the results." She looked around the room at the stunned faces of her team. "Let this be another lesson," she said, her voice sharp. "The best ideas do not always come from the most complicated minds. Sometimes, they come from the clearest." The meeting was dismissed. As the engineers filed out, not one of them would meet Michael's or Lily's eyes. They had been shown up by a child for a second time, and now the quiet resistance was hardening into a silent, resentful wall. Over the next few days, this became their new normal. Michael and Lily would arrive in the morning and spend their days in the small office. Michael would read or try to catch up on online courses, while Lily would draw, read, or play her logic games. Several times a day, they would be called into meetings. The engineers, now wary of being publicly humiliated, would present their problems. Lily would listen, not to their words, but to the shape of the problem, and offer a simple, visual, and invariably correct solution. The wall of resentment grew higher. Conversations would stop when they entered a room. Invitations to lunch were never extended. In the hallways, Michael would hear whispered fragments. "The CEO's pet project. A lucky guess. How long is this joke going to last?" He did his best to shield Lily from it, but she was a smart and perceptive child. "Dad," she asked one evening as they ate dinner in their apartment, "why are the other grown-ups so mad all the time?" Michael's heart ached. He put down his fork. "Honey, sometimes, when people have been looking at a problem for a very long time, it can be hard for them to accept that someone new can see the answer right away. It hurts their pride. But we're a team," Lily said, confused. "On a team, you're supposed to be happy when someone scores a goal, right?" "You're right," Michael said, forcing a smile. "That's exactly right. Don't you worry about them. You just keep scoring goals." But he was worried. He saw the toll it was taking, not on Lily's work, but on her bright spirit. She was quieter at the office, less willing to speak up unless Evelyn directly asked her a question. She kept her drawings to herself until he coaxed them out of her. Evelyn was also aware of the growing toxicity. One afternoon, she asked Michael to join her in her private office. It was a vast, minimalist space with a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a panoramic view of the Golden Gate Bridge. "How is she holding up?" Evelyn asked, gesturing for him to sit in one of the leather chairs opposite her desk. "She's a kid. She can feel it when people don't like her," Michael admitted, his voice heavy. "She doesn't understand why they're being unkind. Mark Benson is the root of it," Evelyn said, her expression grim. "His pride has been wounded, and he's letting it poison the entire team. I'm managing him, but I need you to know that I see what's happening." She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "This is more than just a project for me, Michael. This technology has the potential to save lives." Lily's way of thinking, her ability to see past the noise, it's a gift. "I won't let the bruised egos of a few engineers stand in the way of that. I am protecting her in this process, but I need you to keep her engaged. We're in the final stretch. The full demonstration for the Government Oversight Committee is next week." Michael nodded. "We'll be ready." "I know you will be," Evelyn said. A thought then seemed to strike her. She studied Michael for a moment. "You understand this material, don't you? I've seen you in the meetings. You're not just translating for her. You understand the core concepts." Michael felt a flush of surprise. "I was in engineering school. A long time ago." "What happened?" she asked, her question direct but not unkind. He found himself telling her the whole story. His wife, the medical bills, dropping out to work, raising Lily on his own. He hadn't spoken of it so openly in years. Evelyn listened without interruption, her expression unreadable but attentive. When he was finished, a long silence filled the room. "You sacrificed your future for your family," she said, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. "There is no shame in that. There is honor." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the bridge. "Pride is a dangerous thing, Michael. It can make brilliant people do foolish things, and it can make good people forget what's truly important." She turned back to him. "Don't let them break your daughter's spirit. Her gift is too important." Michael left her office with a renewed sense of purpose. Evelyn was right. This was bigger than a few resentful engineers. He wouldn't let them win. But he didn't know that Mark Benson had already decided on his own endgame. Humiliated and furious, Mark had spent the past 2 nights in the office, long after everyone else had gone home. He wasn't trying to fix problems anymore. He was meticulously reverse engineering Lily's original solution, the one that had started it all. He was convinced it was a fluke, a lucky guess that had happened to work, and he was determined to prove it. He ran hundreds of simulations, pushing the system to its absolute limits, feeding it obscure, chaotic data sets that it would never encounter in the real world. For 2 nights, he found nothing. The solution held. It was elegant, stable, and robust. But on the 3rd night, in the deep, quiet hours before dawn, he found it. A flaw. It wasn't a flaw in Lily's logic, but a consequence of it. By rerouting the data flow so efficiently, her solution had created a tiny, almost undetectable vulnerability. A new, secondary system process, if triggered in a very specific sequence, could create a massive memory leak. A leak that would be invisible at first, but would grow exponentially, until it caused the entire system to crash. Not a stutter, not a glitch, but a catastrophic, total failure. A slow, triumphant smile spread across Mark's face. He knew the demonstration for the government committee was in 3 days. He knew the exact sequence of tests they would run. And now, he knew how to introduce a single, tiny command into the demonstration script. A command that would trigger the memory leak. No one would ever suspect him. They would blame the child. They would say her simple, unsophisticated solution couldn't hold up under real pressure. He would be vindicated. His position, his pride, would be restored. He looked at the lines of code on his screen. It was a betrayal of everything he was supposed to be as an engineer. But to him, it felt like justice. He would let the girl and her janitor father have their moment in the sun. And then, in front of the most important audience imaginable, he was going to make the whole world watch as he brought their little fairy tale crashing down to earth. Of course, here is the conclusion of the story. Part 4, the final test. The morning of the demonstration dawned cool and gray, with a thin veil of fog clinging to the city. The air inside Innovate Dynamics, however, was anything but cool. It was electric with a high-stakes, palpable tension that crackled in every hallway. The demonstration for the Department of Defense Oversight Committee was the final hurdle. It was the moment that would either launch Project Chimera into the stratosphere or send it crashing back to Earth in a blaze of failure. The presentation was held in the company's largest auditorium, a state-of-the-art theater with tiered seating that was now filled with stern-faced officials in dark suits and high-ranking military officers. Board members and key investors lined the front rows, their expressions a mixture of hope and anxiety. At a small technical station in the back, Michael helped Lily adjust the headset that connected her to the engineering team. He knelt beside her chair, his hands on her small shoulders. "How are you feeling, superstar?" he asked, keeping his voice low and steady. "My stomach feels like it's full of fizzy soda," she whispered back. In her pocket, she clutched a small, smooth stone she had painted to look like a ladybug, her good luck charm. "Just remember what we talked about," Michael said, giving her a reassuring squeeze. "You're just here to watch, to make sure the pipes don't get jammed. No matter what happens, I'm right here, and I am so proud of you." Lily gave him a small, brave smile. From across the room, she could see Mark Benson at the main control console, his face a cool, unreadable mask. He gave her a brief, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture that seemed more like a challenge than a greeting. A shiver of unease went down her spine. At precisely 10 a.m., Evelyn Reed walked onto the stage. She was the picture of calm authority in a charcoal gray dress, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and confident. "Today, we are here to show you more than just a new piece of technology. We are here to show you a new frontier in predictive medical analysis." She spoke of the project's potential, of the lives it could save, the futures it could protect. She was charismatic and brilliant. As she concluded her opening remarks, she paused. "Innovation," she said, her gaze sweeping across the audience, "does not always come from where we expect it. It requires us to be open to new perspectives, to listen to new voices. The recent breakthroughs in Project Chimera are a testament to that philosophy." She gave a brief, meaningful glance toward the back of the room, a silent acknowledgement that only Michael, Lily, and her engineering team understood. "Now," she said, turning toward the massive screen behind her, "let's begin the demonstration." The screen lit up with the now flawless 3D model of the human heart, rotating smoothly in a sea of data. The first phase of the test began. The system processed historical medical data, correctly identifying 100% of the known hereditary conditions. It was fast, efficient, and perfect. A low murmur of approval rippled through the audience. The second phase involved a live, predictive analysis of anonymized patient data. The system had to identify potential risks in real time. Again, it performed flawlessly. The data flowed, the algorithms worked, and the results were displayed with breathtaking speed and accuracy. The officials were visibly impressed, leaning forward in their seats and whispering to their aides. Michael felt himself relax for the first time all day. They were going to make it. It was then that Mark Benson made his move. Under the guise of initiating the final, most intensive stress test, his fingers flew across his keyboard. To anyone watching, he looked like a diligent engineer running a routine diagnostic. But hidden within the string of commands was a single, malicious line of code. His Trojan horse. He pressed enter. At first, nothing happened. The system continued to run smoothly. But deep within the code, a process had begun. A tiny memory allocation process was triggered. It began to create copies of a small, redundant data file. Then it copied the copies. Then it copied those. It was a digital cancer, invisible at first, but growing exponentially with every passing microsecond. Then, the first flicker appeared on the screen. A single frame of the rotating heart skipped. It was so fast, most people missed it. But Lily saw it. Her body tensed. A moment later, a small, yellow warning light appeared on the diagnostic panel. Memory allocation, 90%. The heart stuttered again, more noticeably this time. The smooth rotation became jerky. The audience shifted uncomfortably. On stage, a faint line of concern appeared on Evelyn's brow, though her voice never faltered. Memory allocation, 95%. The technicians in the control room started murmuring into their headsets, their voices rising in panic. "What's happening? The memory is spiking. I can't stop it." And then, the system crashed. The heart froze. The data streams vanished. The entire screen was replaced by a single, glaring red error message that filled the auditorium with a sickening glow. Catastrophic system failure. Memory overflow. A collective gasp went through the audience. The demonstration was dead. The silence was deafening, broken only by the frantic whispers of the board members and the urgent, panicked voices coming through the headsets. Mark Benson stood up, his face a perfect mask of feigned shock and professional disappointment. He looked directly at the government officials, his voice ringing with false regret. "It's the core logic," he announced, ensuring everyone could hear. "The patch is unstable. I warned Ms. Reed that it couldn't handle a full-scale simulation. The child's fix, it was too simple. It's collapsing under the pressure." The accusation hung in the air, deadly and effective. Every eye in the room, officials, investors, board members, turned to stare at the small girl sitting at the back of the room. They looked at her with disappointment, with pity, and with accusation. Lily felt their stares like a physical blow. Her face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. It was her fault. She had failed. She had let everyone down. "No," Michael said, standing up, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. "No, it wasn't her. She fixed it." He didn't know how to defend her technically, but he would defend her with everything he had. But it was too late. The damage was done. The narrative was set. The brilliant engineers had been overruled, and the whimsical, childish solution had failed spectacularly on the biggest stage imaginable. But as the tears streamed down Lily's face, she looked at the big red error message. She wasn't a coder, but she was a master of patterns. And this pattern was wrong. A normal system failure, a traffic jam, as she thought of it, was messy and chaotic. This was not. This was clean. It was a single, massive error. It wasn't like a bunch of cars getting stuck in an intersection. It was like someone had built a brick wall right in the middle of the highway. Her mind flashed to the command Mark had entered just before the crash. She had seen it out of the corner of her eye. It was longer than the others. More complex. A thought, clear as a bell, cut through her grief. He didn't find a jam. He made one. With a new, fierce determination, she wiped her eyes, slipped out of her chair, and walked with purpose toward the main control console where Mark was now talking gravely to two of the other engineers. They fell silent as she approached. She didn't say a word. She reached past Mark and, with two small fingers, pointed to a single line in the command log on his screen. The command he had entered moments before the crash. Then she looked up at him, her blue eyes no longer filled with tears, but with a cold, clear certainty. "You did that," she said, her voice small, but it carried in the stunned silence. "That command isn't for the test. You told the computer to make copies. Thousands of copies of the same thing until its memory was full. You filled it up on purpose." Mark stared at her, his face instantly draining of all color. He opened his mouth to deny it, to laugh it off, but no words came out. The sheer, simple audacity of her accusation had left him speechless. Evelyn, who had come down from the stage, heard every word. She looked from Lily's pointing finger to the absolute terror that had appeared in Mark's eyes. She knew, in that instant, that the child was telling the truth. "Pull up the base parameters for the stress test script," Evelyn commanded another technician, her voice like ice. "Compare them to the command log. Now." The technician's fingers flew across the keyboard. After 10 agonizing seconds, he looked up, his face pale. "She's right, Ms. Reed," he said, his voice barely a whisper. The command line Mark entered, it contains an unauthorized recursive duplication script. It's not part of the test. It was designed to force a memory overflow. The truth landed in the room with the force of a physical explosion. Mark Benson had not just allowed the system to fail, he had orchestrated it. He had committed an act of deliberate, malicious sabotage. He looked around wildly, his eyes pleading, but he found no allies. He saw only the shocked and disgusted faces of his colleagues, the furious glare of the board members, and the cold, unyielding stare of Evelyn Reed. 2 security guards moved quietly to his side. His career, his reputation, everything he had sacrificed his integrity to protect, had just been destroyed by the one person in the room he had underestimated. In the aftermath of the failed demonstration, a strange, calm efficiency took over. Mark Benson was quietly escorted from the building. Evelyn Reed, with unwavering composure, addressed the stunned government officials. She explained the situation with blunt honesty, framing the attempted sabotage not as a weakness of the company, but as a testament to the system's own transparent logging and the unique diagnostic talent now on her team. The committee, impressed by her candor and Lily's incredible discovery, agreed to reschedule. The contract was not lost. In fact, their confidence in Innovate Dynamics had never been higher. An hour later, the vast auditorium was empty, save for three figures standing in the center of the room: Evelyn, Michael, and Lily. Evelyn walked over and knelt in front of Lily, just as she had in the small apartment what felt like a lifetime ago. "Lily," she said, her voice filled with a warmth and sincerity that went far beyond that of a CEO. "Today, you face something much harder than a broken piece of code. You face cruelty, and you were braver than anyone I have ever met. You did more than save a project today. You stood up for the truth. Thank you." Lily, her composure finally breaking, threw her arms around Evelyn's neck in a hug. Evelyn, startled at first, returned the embrace, holding the small girl who had changed everything. When they parted, Evelyn stood and turned to Michael. Her expression was resolute, as if she had just solved the most important problem of her career. "This company was founded on the principle that the right idea can change the world," she said. "But for years, I've only been looking for those ideas in boardrooms and laboratories. I was wrong. Talent doesn't care about degrees or job titles. It just is." She took a deep breath. "I am creating a new branch of this company, the Innovate Dynamics Foundation for Young Minds. Its mission will be to find, fund, and nurture gifted children in STEM, regardless of their background or circumstances. We are seeding it with an initial grant of $10 million. Michael stared at her, unsure where this was going. "Its first official beneficiary," Evelyn continued, smiling down at Lily, "will be Lily Hayes. The foundation will provide a full, unconditional scholarship to any university she chooses to attend, anywhere in the world. Her future education is secured." Tears welled in Michael's eyes. He was so overwhelmed he couldn't speak. "But the foundation will need a director," Evelyn went on, her gaze now fixed on him. "Someone who understands its mission. Someone who knows how to protect and encourage a child's gift. Someone with integrity and honor. I'm offering you the position, Michael, director of the Young Minds program. It comes with an executive-level salary and a new office. On this floor." Michael finally found his voice. "Me? Ms. Reed, I'm a janitor." "No," Evelyn said firmly, a genuine smile lighting up her face. "You were a janitor. Now, you are a director. And more importantly, you are the father of a genius. Your job will be to make sure her path is clear of people like Mark Benson, and to help me find others like her." She extended her hand. "What do you say?" Michael looked at Lily, whose face was shining with a joy so pure it took his breath away. He looked at Evelyn, the powerful CEO who had seen the value not just in his daughter, but in him. After a lifetime of just getting by, of sacrificing his own dreams, a door had opened to a future he had never dared to imagine. He took Evelyn's hand and shook it firmly. "I say yes." 1 week later, the sun was setting over San Francisco, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. In a small, familiar apartment, Michael Hayes sat at his kitchen table, but he wasn't polishing floors. He was helping his daughter with her math homework. Everything was the same, and yet everything was different. The weight that had sat on his shoulders for so many years was gone, replaced by a sense of hope so profound it felt like a physical presence in the room. His notice was in at Innovate Dynamics. He would start his new position at the end of the month. Lily's educational trust was already being managed by Evelyn's own financial team. Lily finished her last equation and looked up at her dad, her blue eyes bright in the warm light of the kitchen. "I liked today, Dad," she said. "I liked it too, superstar," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. He was no longer just a janitor, and she was no longer just a little girl who was good at puzzles. They were a team that had faced down the giants of pride and arrogance and had won. Their future was no longer a narrow hallway of uncertainty, but a wide-open vista of possibility. And as he looked at his daughter, he knew that this was not the end of her story. It was just the beginning. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more.
If you believe that true heroism lies in the everyday acts of dignity and perseverance, then you belong here. Subscribe to Unsung Heroes. Join our community to celebrate the resilience and worth of every individual and ensure their quiet sacrifices never go unnoticed. Like and share. Help us amplify these unfiltered, authentic stories by liking this video and sharing it with someone who needs to be reminded of the silent power of the human spirit. Be a witness. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a powerful look at life's challenges and triumphs across the American social landscape. Subscribe today and honor the silent power of the human spirit.